All right. We will. There is later on. I do have some. Well, some of it we've already got. Just a real quick refresher, and then we'll move on from there. There's some stories. Some of the justices that are here. It's kind of funny. Yes.
Do you have a short copy of that? Or is that going to be on there? I don't know where it went. I must look it up.
You have the usual break?
It should be up top.
How's your day been, Brandon? Pretty good.
No, unless the people took it off.
I don't have to work, but I have to.
So,
Making money.
for this one of the questions you guys struggle with a little bit, this is Article 3. So the U.S. Supreme Court, Judicial Branch, Article 3. It's a true-false. And the question was, the Supreme Court or the Judicial Branch is contained in Article 2 of the Constitution. That is not. That would be a false statement. It is Article 3. Article 3. Okay? So just for the quiz on Friday, if you see it again. All right. Here we go. So again, some of this real quick, just a refresher, because it was 2 weeks ago-ish that we talked about this. Judicial power, the Supreme Court, Congress has the ability to make new courts. The only condition to be in the Supreme Court is good behavior. That's it. That's the only limitation, right? There is no official age. You don't technically have to be a U.S. citizen.
Here's what I found.
No. Oh, it was looking up Article 3 for me. That's great. So, if let's say you guys were the Senate and you were the committee that was going to approve and or disapprove of this Supreme Court nominee, and I was a foreign, I don't know, somebody from Japan that's in the United States, and President Biden nominates them and then puts them in front of you to be a Supreme Court justice. Are you guys going to confirm that person to the Supreme Court as a non-U.S. citizen? I predict no. All right, you want a U.S. citizen to be running that. So here's another question, open-ended, kind of a discussion type situation. Why do they serve for life, and why do we not have a limit on how long they can serve? What do you think?
Can't they resign anytime?
They can. They can resign or they can die. They can be kicked out. They can be impeached. Remember that? That's one of the checks that Congress has on federal is impeachment. Right? If you are running, or if you're a Supreme Court justice or a justice, and you have to get reelected every single time you run, what are you thinking about every election time? Politics, right? I'm thinking about how I get reelected. Am I thinking necessarily about what the law says?
No, you're thinking about
that might influence, right? So I'm going to get reelected. I got to make sure everyone likes me, so I'm going to rule this way. There's a potential for that. So the founding fathers were like, nope. If you're a federal judge, now the state of Ohio, just so you guys are aware, our Supreme Court in Ohio, 6 years. So they do have to run for reelection. I will tell you that not many people look into how people, there's probably some, run at the state level. The federal level is the bigger names. You can hear like Ketanji Brown Jackson is the current nominee, who is most likely going to be the next Supreme Court justice when Breyer steps down. I'll show you guys who I'm talking about in a second. But again, the goal is, what's the law say, not what do the people want you to do. Go by the Constitution. That's the idea. And then there's going to be a question on the quiz about that, right? So the reason that they do that for life is so you're not influenced by politics. You just do what you think based off of your history and your experience is the right thing to do. Good. Next part. Good. We talked about this. Jurisdiction, exclusive, concurrent, between the difference. The other one that you remember, plaintiff is going to be the first name on a court case. Defendant will always be the second name on the court case. Right? So Johnson v. Brown, Johnson is the person charging them with the crime. Brown is the person defending themselves. So the order of the names does impact the case itself. Appellates versus original. Appellate's the one we hear about all the time. That's the one that goes up the ladder. You take it to Medina County courts, and then that gets appealed to the state court, and the state court to the federal court, and the federal court to the Supreme Court. That's the process. Original jurisdiction comes in right here, and that's state versus state. This actually happened in the last election. Texas actually sued Pennsylvania. If you guys remember that by any chance, in the news, the state of Texas was afraid that, and this was pre-election, they sued Pennsylvania, I think it was a day or two before the election, because they were afraid all the new laws that Pennsylvania had passed regarding their voting was going to negatively impact the election, and they thought it was illegal, so they sued them, and the Supreme Court came back and said, no, we're not going to hear the case. The states are allowed to have their own laws, even if you don't like them. They're not illegal because it's the state's rights. There's actually a big debate at the federal level too. Congress is trying to adjust some of our state laws as well. Yeah.
Why was it 2 days before the election? Doesn't it take a while?
It does, but if it's a case, they can get it directly to the Supreme Court.
So if it would have run directly, wouldn't it put up like election results if they would have, or how?
If the Supreme, well, that was one of those rulings where because it was a state to state, it immediately went right to the Supreme Court. There was no waiting.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court ruled on it like quickly. So if it's a state versus state, typically it's everything is pushed aside. What's going on with the states?
Okay.
And in that situation, the Supreme Court said it's not a case we're going to hear. States are sovereign states. They get to make their own rules. So if there's issues, that's on them. Now this is the one that we were about to get to. This is the newest slide for you guys. So the decisions of the courts are never set in stone. They're literally the opinions of the court. Right now, and you'll see this when you do your Supreme Court trivia stuff on Friday. This is currently the Justice John Roberts Court, and it's because he's the Chief Justice. A couple of years from now, if he retires or resigns or whatever, and Joe Schmo takes over the court as the Chief Justice, then the next court would be the Joe Schmo Court. Right? And a couple of years down the road, Lisa Brown becomes the Chief Justice. It's the Lisa Brown Court. Right? Whoever the Chief Justice is, that's their court. So as of right now, in the Justice Roberts Court, every time you hear them declare something, it's the opinion of the court. And that can change, and it often has. If you guys, we talked a little bit about this way back, or the names may sound familiar to you. There was Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a separate but equal court case from years ago, where as long as we have a white water fountain and a black water fountain and a white school and a black school, we're legal. Is that currently legal?
No.
No. A new case came out, Brown v. Board of Education Topeka, which overturned the previous case. So again, cases can change, the opinions can change. The Roe v. Wade, which I think on Monday next week, I'm going to have you guys listen to a podcast about that one, because that one is going to be huge this summer via Roe v. Wade, Casey versus Planned Parenthood, and the current case at the Supreme Court, which again, I think is a Mississippi versus, I can't remember what it is, but the state of Mississippi has that heartbeat law where they're not allowing abortions till after the heartbeat is heard. So there's a court case suing Mississippi. And so the Supreme Court may change the opinion of the previous court this summer. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be an overturning, but it's going to be an alteration in there. But in regards to writing these opinions, someone has to tell us exactly what's going on. So let's say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You guys are the majority. You guys won this most previous vote, and you guys are going to have Corbin write the majority opinions. So he's gonna write it. You guys might throw like a little blurb or maybe a paragraph or two of what your thoughts were. But Corbin's gonna write the whole thing out and he has to release that. They'll most likely have it prior to the release of their opinion so that they can just put it on the website right away. And then you can tell why they voted the way they did. Now you three were the persons that didn't win the vote. I apologize that it didn't win, sorry. But you guys would also have to write why you think these guys were wrong. So you would be writing a dissenting opinion. Right? So that way anyone who wants to know can read your opinions and say, you can say, I completely disagree with their opinion based off of this law, this law, this law. I think we should have gone this way. Right? Now at the same time, the concurrent opinion comes back to these guys. Right? So let's say that Connor agrees with all of them, but for a different reason. So yes, we all end at the exact same point, and we all agree that this should be passing, but I think we should have done it for a different reason. We should be passing this bill and making it legal because this versus that. It's kind of like if you guys are going to the movies with friends, and you want to go because you really, really want to go to see the movie, but your friend just really likes the popcorn. We're both going to see the movie, but I'm going there for a different reason, right? And or someone that works there, I might want to see. Yeah. So those are the three opinions that you'll hear in regards to the decisions of the Supreme Court. Now, the court itself. So I'm going to show you guys. There's one person that's going to be changing probably the next week or two, depending. Because as of right now, for those who aren't aware, Brown Jackson, the current nominee, is just got two more Republicans on board. So I believe it's going to be like a 53-47 vote for her to become the next Supreme Court justice. So she's going to be replacing this guy right here, who I'll show you guys in a second. All right.
He looks happy.
What's that?
He looks happy as hell.
Now, what I'm showing you guys, and the reason Justice Roberts isn't first, is this is the order with which they've been on the court. So Clarence Thomas here, he's been on the longest. He was nominated and put on way back in 91, so we're talking 32 years ago. He was put on the court. He's been on for a long time. He was actually a 51-50 vote. The vice president, at the time had to break the tie in Congress because of some of the stuff that came up during his appointment process. Very, very similar to Kavanaugh. Matter of fact, there were some political cartoons about Kavanaugh and him almost identical in some of the situations because he was done. He was taking over for Thurgood Marshall, who was the first black justice on the Supreme Court, and George H.W. wanted to replace Thurgood Marshall with another black man, and so they chose Clarence Thomas. Different perspective, and I'll go over that here in a minute in regards to the law and how you perceive it. One of the funny things, I'm curious to see if this link takes me what I think it takes me to, was the testimony that came along. No, it doesn't. I'll bring it up tomorrow. I'll find it tonight. Only because the justice itself, I'll give you two little blurbs. That SNL had a field day with this, by the way. They had a lot of fun making fun of Clarence Thomas and the Senate at the same time. When he was being questioned, so to give you guys a little backstory, there was a woman he worked with named was Anita Hill. And she stepped forward literally like a day or two before his voting of swearing him in or making him the next Supreme Court justice, stating that there was some potential sexual impropriety and or advances that would question his integrity as a Supreme Court justice. So of course they brought her in front of the Congress or the committee and they started asking her questions. And coincidentally, President Biden was the senator in charge at the time. So he was in charge of the committee that nominated him and asked this woman to give specific examples of what happened that made it not appropriate. And so two stories that I remember, because actually I watched it during my class. I was actually a junior at the time. And our teacher had it up on the TV for us to watch. And so I heard this live, which made me, we all got a nice chuckle out of this. They said, can you give us specific examples as to why or what he did? And she said, yes. One example was one of the staff members brought a Coke in to the room which he then proceeded to put a pubic hair on top of the Coke because he thought it was a funny joke. Okay. There's actually a when I interviewed Clarence Thomas, he's like, I don't know, take a pubic hair off for a Coke, but okay. The second one was that, and she claimed, and again, this is the problem, nothing was provable. There was no like evidence to prove any of this stuff. Was that he played a pornographic film. And so the senators, rather than just leaving it at that, were like, can you give us more specifics? Like can you tell us the names or the name of the movie? And she's like, well, I mean, I don't really want to. And they're like, well, for the record, we need to have more specific information. So, of course, you can see where SNL would take off with this and have some fun. So in open court or an open session, so everyone was watching this live all over the United States. She's like, yes, he played a movie which had a character by the name of Long Dong Silver. I always laugh because there's a part of me that gets nervous. People are like, oh, I can't believe you said that in class. It's congressional record, folks. Go ahead, pull it up. You can get videos of it. But yeah, so that was one of the things. It was a 50-50 vote, and the Vice President, Dan Quayle, at the time had to break the tie to get him into office. There is a documentary that we may watch near the end of the year about him that's very, very, very good. He actually talks about that whole situation. So, again, he's been on the longest. The second oldest nominee is Justice Breyer. And this is the gentleman that is retiring, whether he knew it or not, because there was like the media had kind of come out and said, yes, he's retiring. And then he was like, yeah, I guess I'm retiring. So it's a weird situation. This is like 3 months ago. But Clinton appointed him. The issue with Breyer was he kind of flips back and forth. Sometimes he's relatively conservative. Sometimes he's a little more liberal. Activist versus constitutionalist, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Justice Jackson Brown, that's currently right now running, or is going to be nominated and appointed. She is most definitely not a double-sided person. She's almost always on one side of the views when it comes to laws and the Constitution. So I think the Democrats like her better because she's more consistently one-sided with some of the court cases. Chief Justice John Roberts. This is the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He was under George W. Bush, and he was nominated. They put him in as a moderate. He's like kind of the middle of the ground, which is what a judge should be, in my opinion. And lots of people thought, well, he's appointed by George W. Bush. He's going to vote conservative. He's going to be right wing. He's going to be very, very anti-gay, anti all these different things. He's actually voted more for some of the liberal things than he has the conservative things in regards to gay marriage and other things like that. During the Affordable Care Act Supreme Court case, because the states actually sued, 26 states took the federal government to court, and that was a direct right to the Supreme Court. When it got there, Justice Roberts heard the case, and everyone thought, oh, he's anti-Obama. He's not going to vote for it. And in his opinion, he was one of the concurrent opinions. He agreed with the justices that were for Affordable Care Act, but he said, I agree with it because Congress can make it a tax, and then it's legal. So yes, the president can still do this. So that's actually why some people look at the Affordable Care Act is a tax on us. It's not something that's provided to us by the government. We have to pay for it via tax dollars. That's the other thing too. It doesn't matter how long or how old you are. It's whoever takes over for him. So when he retires, whoever takes his position is the next Chief Justice. It has nothing to do with seniority. It's literally that role, that position. All right. Alito, he was also a George W. Bush appointment, 2006. Pretty conservative in his perspectives, more of a constitutionalist, a judicial restraint type of judge. He actually publicly came out against Pennsylvania during the election. So when they brought it to the Supreme Court said, in general, we as a court are not going to hear this case. But then he was interviewed publicly by some news source. I don't know who it was. But he said, no, I think the Pennsylvania law is illegal. It's going to harm the election. It's going to cause all sorts of issues. But as a single member of the court, I can't change the law. I can only tell you what my thoughts are. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, first Latin Supreme Court justice, let alone Latina. President Obama appointed her, and she has been pretty much what everyone thought she was going to be. She is more of a judicial activist, which when I get to that, I'll explain more. Yeah.
Why does it seem like every president that gets in the office, there's a certain problem with a certain demographic, so they have to take someone from that demographic and put them somewhere in the government to make it look good?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
that's just how it works.
You're playing politics 100% of the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like when I bring up President Trump's first or second one specifically, the first two were white males, and so it's like Trump.
Yeah.
So what did he do with the third one?
Female.
Female mother, right? When they nominated, if you guys remember Sarah Palin when she was running with John McCain way back when, one of the biggest reasons they put her on the ticket was because John McCain was an older guy, and he actually, for those who aren't aware, he had lots of issues, but his arms were broken when he was in Vietnam, and because it was called the Hilton Hanoi, they never set his arms, so his arms were like set the wrong, like not good, and so he always looked robotic and stiff and kind of like awkwardly moved around. And people thought, well, you're going to lose the young people again because, so they, and you want to get the female vote, so you bring on Sarah Palin, and this is going to sound bad, but there was some politics. One of their children was, her most recent child that she had just had has Down syndrome. Right? So it was one of those things where they didn't intentionally use it, but I'm sure there was a part of it like, oh, we're going to get that vote. So we're going to get that vote. So when you look at Jackson Brown, I can guarantee Biden did a lot of that because politics. Right? I got a black female. Who's going to vote against her? Right? So, Elena Kagan, Barack Obama appointment, 2010, just a year after Sotomayor. And she has an interesting perspective because she actually wrote the Affordable Care Act. And then when they sued Obama or the government, they asked her to recuse herself because she was the one that wrote the very law that they were actually having in front of court. And she could have, but she did not. And of course, she voted in favor of the law and said, no, this is perfectly legal. But she was also kind of slanted on that one. But her and Sotomayor both have voted the exact same the entire time they've been together. This was the situation with Gorsuch. I don't think you guys would remember this. I do, just because I was, of course, teaching it at the time. But when Trump took off, this was right when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton. And President Obama wanted to he nominated somebody. He's allowed to do that for the Supreme Court. And the Republicans held control of the Senate. So like, well, we'll wait till the next president, and then we'll let the next president pick who they want. So there was a big, huge cry by the Democrats, like this isn't fair. President can, and the Senate Republicans said, oh no, you're right. The president can nominate whoever he wants to, but we, the Senate, controlled by the Republicans, don't have to talk to that person. We don't have to go through the process. We don't have to do anything. We can just push it off and push it off. And oh my gosh, you're no longer president anymore. I'm sorry. Yes, and the part of the thing during the election, I remember this was actually one of the parts of the debate was if Hillary wins, she'll have control of the Supreme Court. So think about the next three people are all Republican nominated people. If Hillary had won, 3 Democrats, so the Democrats would have control of the Supreme Court. So there was this big, huge, you're not only voting for Trump, you're voting for the Supreme Court and the rules and the laws in the future. Right? So he came in right in, I think it was January, February of the following year. It was right away he appointed him. Kavanaugh had almost an identical thing happen to him that Thomas had happened. He was a day away from being voted in, and people thought, yeah, he's a little more on the conservative side. But then a woman stepped forward. It's tough to do any of that stuff, and started talking about some of the things that he had done in high school that potentially would have been sexual impropriety. I think there was some college stuff that came up as well. Did anybody by any chance have one of their teachers show you guys, watch any of this during school? You guys are probably a little bit, was it 2018? How old were you guys in 2018? 4 years ago, so 15, 14 years old. So yeah, it probably wouldn't have been but I put it up in class too, because there was a couple times where he was like adamantly, "You guys gotta be kidding me. Are you serious?" And the woman had come forward and made some claims. Again, there was no proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he had done these things. There was no video evidence, there was no pictures, it was literally just her word, and she had nobody that was really backing her up. So in the end, he was able to go through and did make it into the court, of course. Now, the issue with him was everyone thought he was going to be really, really conservative, but I want to say it was 2019, the Family Leave Act came up, which was moms and dads being able to leave and stay home with their kids. And there was a big push. There was a lawsuit that came up that was in the Supreme Court regarding adding LGBTQ people into that specific Family Leave Act. And everyone thought for sure Kavanaugh was against it, but he voted for it. He was like, no, I agree. I think the LGBTQ community needs to be part of the Family Leave Act. So people who thought he was going to be very, very conservative in that situation, he jumped over and kind of was more on the liberal side. And the most recent one, Amy Coney Barrett. And this one brought up a whole nother situation because if you guys remember, the Republicans were in charge of the Congress. It was about to switch over to Joe Biden, and they had essentially lost the election. It was still kind of being argued in the courts, and that was the whole, weird stuff that happened in the last election. But everyone said, well, remember the last time when Obama was in office, and you guys said, no, we're going to wait to the next president. You guys are going to wait to the next president, right? And the Republicans said, nope, we're in charge of the Senate. We can see whoever we want to. So they had her come in, went through all the hearings. So it was one of those weird situations. Now, if it was on the other foot, would the Democrats have done the same thing? Heck yeah. So again, this is where you play politics. Timing, who's in charge. All right. Now this is where we get into the types of judges that we have on the court. Judicial restraint is all about what does the law say. The Constitution says this, therefore I'm ruling based off of the Constitution. I'm not going to put my personal opinions into it. I'm not going to stretch the law to fit this or adjust the law to go around that thing over there. I know 2 weeks ago I brought it came up in one of our discussions where I was talking about that child pornography, that case that came to the Supreme Court, and it was a guy who had drawn all the images. Right, a judicial restraint in that situation, they said, well, this is not a federal law, this is the state law. So this is not a Supreme Court thing. We're sending it back to the state. Whatever the state decides is their 10th Amendment right to deal with that. That shouldn't be a federal issue because there's no law in the Constitution that deals with that. So the states get it. So if you guys remember 10th Amendment, if it's not exclusively given to the so if it's not given to the federal government nor denied the states, then the states automatically get it. It's the reserve powers. So that's a judicial restraint. So whatever the Constitution says, we're going to follow that letter of the law. That's the one you typically see more on those Republican-nominated justices. You tend to see it, not all the time. They tend to go, okay, what's the Constitution say? What's the Constitution say? Versus judicial activists. And this is that big thing with Jackson Brown, the lady that's currently Brown Jackson, that is currently probably going to be voted in the next couple of days. One of the questions, and some of you guys may have seen it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, one of the questions that she was asked was, can you please define woman? And she said, no, I cannot. Now, if you are a judicial restraint, or if you're more on the conservative perspective, you're going to look at that and go, wait, what? As a Supreme Court justice, you should know exactly what the meaning of this is. And of course, there's been some jokes about that from the conservative side, saying, well, that doesn't what she should be. There's a definition. Give me this. But if you're a judicial activist and she's not defining the word woman, think about all the new stuff that's going to come in the courts dealing with LGBTQ, where she might look at that and go, oh, well, I don't think the Constitution deals with that. Therefore, we should look at changing the law this way, or we should make it legal and encompass this. So you start to tend to see a judicial activist taking the law and they'll say, yeah, but they didn't think about this. But they didn't think about this. So we should adjust the law to change these things, right? So you tend to see them voting in a different way, more towards the activist adjusting the law stuff. Good. The phrase you're going to hear in the next video I show you guys. Is there a video? Yeah. So is everyone done with that? Just want to make sure we got that. So the guy that you're going to see here is Antonin Scalia. He wrote a book. This is now he passed away in 2016, and Gorsuch actually took his spot. That's the spot that Gorsuch took over. And he and Clarence Thomas, of course, there was jokes over the years that that Clarence Thomas voted the way that Scalia told him to. They're very, very, very like-minded. But in this situation, they're asked about Roe v. Wade. Now, this is a judicial restraint answer to this position.
Let's turn to Roe v. Wade, because you, Justice Scalia, you had very strong opinions about it at the time. I know you do now. Why were you so violently opposed to it?
I wouldn't say violently. I'm a peaceful man. Adamantly opposed. Adamantly. Basically, because the theory that was expounded to impose that decision was a theory that does not make any sense, and that is, namely, the theory of substantive due process. There's a due process clause in the Constitution which says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. That is obviously a guarantee, not of life, not of liberty, not of property. You can be deprived of all of them, but not without due process. My court, in
Real quick before it goes any further, anything you hear Pierce Morgan bring up is more of a judicial activist. Like, why doesn't the court do this? Why doesn't the court do that? And then Scalia will kind of defend with the judicial restraint perspective.
recent years has invented what is called substantive due process by simply saying some liberties are so important that no process would suffice to take them away. And that was the theory used in Roe versus Wade. And it's a theory that is simply a lie. The world is divided into substance and procedure.
Should abortion be illegal in your eyes?
Should it be illegal? Yeah, I don't have public views on what should be illegal and what shouldn't. I have public views on what the Constitution prohibits and what it doesn't prohibit.
But in the Constitution, when they framed it, they didn't even allow women to have the right to vote, and they gave women no rights.
Oh, come on. No rights?
Did they?
Of course. They were entitled to due process of law.
All kinds
You
of
couldn't send them to prison without the same kind of a trial that a man would
Right,
get.
but again, it comes back to changing times. The founding fathers were never going to have any reason at that time to consider a woman's right to keep a baby or to have an abortion. It wouldn't have even entered their minds, would it?
Well, I don't know why. Why wouldn't it?
Because at the time it was just...
They didn't have wives and daughters that they cared about?
They did, but it was not an issue that they would ever consider framing in a constitution.
I don't
But when women began to take charge in the last century of their lives and their rights and so on, and began to fight for these, everybody believed that was the right thing to do, didn't it? I mean, why would you be distinctively against that?
My view is, regardless of whether you think prohibiting abortion is good or whether you think prohibiting abortion is bad, regardless of how you come out on that, my only point is the Constitution does not say anything about it. It leaves it up to democratic choice. Some states prohibited it, some states didn't. What Roe versus Wade said was that no state can prohibit it. That is simply not in the Constitution. It was one of those many things, most things in the world left to democratic choice.
The other one that comes up is he talks about is a case called Texas v. Johnson, where a guy burns a flag. And the discussion that came up in that was, you found in favor of the guy who burned the flag. Isn't that opposed to and Scalia said, listen, if it was up to me, I want to go up and punch the guy because that flag, what it represents. He's like, but the law says freedom of speech. As long as that person wasn't causing a riot, causing disturbance, they can burn that flag. There was actually a situation. There was one. You guys may have seen the video. This is years ago. It was a former Army. She'd been in the Army for, I think, the full 6 years. She was a college professor. I want to say University of Phoenix is the one that, or Phoenix, University of Arizona, not the island. University of Arizona, and she was on campus, and there was a group that was protesting the United States, and they had a flag on the ground, and they were walking all over it. And she came up to them, and she's like, "You guys need to pick that flag up." And they went through the whole thing, and at one point, they kind of stepped off of the flag a little bit, enough for her to grab it and pull it up and fold it up and started to walk away. And the group actually called the police on her, or at least the campus police, and they arrested her because they had the right to freedom of speech. They weren't causing a violence. They were just stating their opinions while walking on the flag. Now, personally, I'm with the woman that was in the Army. I'm like, no, the representation of the flag and what it stands for, no. However, by law, freedom of speech, right? So he was talking about that, and he said basically, see, that's what the Constitution says. Whether I agree with it or not, that's what the law says, right? So there's no usual activism. This is it. What we get into here, this is just a real quick blurb, and then we'll move on to something else here. If you guys remember, back when we did the More Perfect Union, and one of the questions was about Madison, and the question was, why was Madison against the Bill of Rights? What he had said was, it's already in the Constitution. It's already there. We don't need a Bill of Rights. So if you look at this one, right here, the trial of all crimes except in cases of impeachment shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in state where the said crime shall have been committed, but when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. So there's your jury trial, right? There's your extradition. So those are both already in there, and that was also what, the Fifth Amendment? So that was where Madison was like, it's already there. Now, is it easier to find the Bill of Rights versions? Yeah. This was kind of hidden in the third article. Now, the treason aspect. Treason's a good one, right? Because there's a whole bunch of little things that go along with treason. Against the U.S. shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies. There's a couple more things I'm going to jump onto in the next slide. The Congress has the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood. And I'll explain that here in the next slide. So in regards to treason, the charge can only be used against someone who is from the country or a country the government has declared war against or our enemies. And that kind of opens it up when we do the enemies thing. What was our last declared war? World War II, right? So everything after that, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, South Korea, any of the other wars, so-called, weren't official wars. So how do we cover those people that are helping those foreign agencies? That's where we have the enemies, right? So if we were back in Russia, or if we were against Japanese or Italy, then great for World War II. But that one covers Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, any of those countries. If you were caught helping someone knowingly, that's the big thing here. I have to knowingly be helping someone who's doing something illegal, then they can come after me for treason. If it's an incidental situation, you had no idea, right? If you can create reasonable doubt, you're good to go. What we're looking for specifically, you cannot be convicted of treason unless there are two witnesses to this overt act. So you have to have two people that witnessed what you did on an overt situation, or if you, in open court, say, yes, I did some treasonous stuff. Right? So those are the only two ways that we can get you for treason. Two people witnessing overt acts, or you confessing in open court. Not a private meeting, not in front of just the judge and the lawyers, open court in front of everybody. Some of the things I came up with, I found punishment ranges from 5 years minimum jail, $10,000 fine, all the way up to death. So a little variation depending on what you did or didn't do. Maximum
hard to
Yeah.
go past.
Yeah. The other thing that they did have on there was I cannot go after your family. So if you go back to our origins, right, with King George, how did he go after people? Well, I can't get you, but I can get your mom and your dad, your brother, and your sister to get at you. So what they did for the U.S. Constitution was said, no, just the person. Unless we can prove that they were involved, aiding or abetting, no. Congress is in charge of all of the different aspects of it. And tomorrow I will show you guys some of the current, actually we have others, I have a massive list of people that spied on us over the years. There's a good video clip too of a movie from 2007 that was all about spies in the U.S.
Cardboard.
You still have the dog now? The dog?